Product Recall is a pretty great episode of The Office. This is the 20th episode of the third season. This is directed by Randall Einhorn, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. I don't actually have too many notes, by which I mean I wasn't writing down everything that happened with this one. I don't really know why, because I was enjoying it. I guess I just didn't have too much to say about the specific things that happened, but I will mention certain highlights and talk about the narrative in general. And I will go through things kind of chronologically, but as I said, scene by scene, I don't have too many thoughts. But the opening was amazing. Jim comes into the office wearing a colour we don't usually see him in it. I initially didn't realise what was going on until we saw his hair, because he's wearing yellow, the same colour that Dwight wears, and then his hair is very much like Dwight's, and he sits down, he puts on glasses, he looks a lot like Dwight, and then he starts talking like Dwight, and it was brilliant. And then he shouted from Michael at one point to imitate Dwight, and I really enjoyed it. It was a really good, fun way to start things off. The main narrative is about the fact that there is a product recall, as the title suggests, because some employee decided to put a rather inappropriate watermark on loads of batches of paper, and it is a duck doing things with a mouse. Michael kind of suggested it's a Mickey Mouse. Doesn't really look like Mickey Mouse, but the mouse is wearing gloves, so I guess that's what they were going for, while also avoiding, obviously, copyright protection. And everybody is tasked with different things to help out, and Dwight is in charge of the press conference, even though the press haven't been in touch, and Kelly gets to teach some of the others about how to answer the phone, because there are going to be a lot more phone calls, so some people need to help out doing that. And Angela's face throughout it all was just absolutely brilliant. Kevin was getting into it, but yeah, Angela wasn't impressed. And I have to say, I would be on Angela's side. I realise I don't like Angela a lot. I mean, I love what she brings to it. I think as a character, she's brilliant, but her personality is very unpleasant. But I often catch myself really agreeing with Angela a lot of the time, which is kind of awkward for me. But yeah, her face there was brilliant. And the story with Andy is a little bit peculiar. And I don't know if I like it. It felt a little bit out of place. It felt like it came out of nowhere. I don't think it worked very well. But it took me by surprise, because Andy and Jim are teaming up against Jim's wishes to go to a client in a school. It's a high school. And while they're there, Andy spots his girlfriend. And of course, Jim assumes it's the teacher. It's not. It's one of the high school students. And Andy, and I believe Andy, when he said he didn't know that this person was still in high school. But I'll be honest, I feel like he should have known. I feel like it should have been at least moderately obvious. And I don't know, I don't like this part of the narrative. It just felt a bit weird, and it felt very different to the kind of things we usually get from The Office. And different doesn't automatically mean bad. I didn't care for it. But we get an interesting moment with Jim and Andy, and we'll come back to that in a minute. We then have a client visiting Michael. Michael is trying to get Dwight to, of course, take photos, good photos for positive publicity in the press, and this client wants Michael to quit. And I have to say, it wasn't Michael's fault, because Creed was the one who was supposed to do quality control, and he didn't, and he ultimately ends up getting somebody fired in this episode. Not somebody at Dunder Mifflin, but somebody who was meant to allegedly meet for the quality control, even though he made it all up. And Michael shouldn't resign, because it's not his fault. At the end of the day, he can't micromanage Creed. So I feel like the client was completely out of order. She has a right to be angry, but she's angry at the wrong person. Just because Michael's in charge, she's not a micromanager. Much to Michael's credit, actually. He's kind of the opposite of a micromanager. He literally encourages the staff to slack off and do things that are not work-related. So, not his fault. I understand her anger and frustration, but Michael was right to say that he's not leaving. And then we come to the end. As I said, I don't have that many thoughts. I enjoyed it well enough, though. And the final scene was actually kind of interesting because, and maybe it's a sign of things to come, I don't know. Maybe it was just a one-off, but Andy and Jim are in the car heading back from the meeting at the school. And Andy's obviously very disturbed by what he found out, which really reinforces the fact that I believe, at least, he had no idea she was in high school. And he's really affected by this. And Jim can tell this. And on the way to the school, Andy was singing, making music with his mouth, basically, not necessarily vocalizing, but certainly making music. And obviously Jim was irritated by that. But on the drive back, Jim started to encourage Andy to sing In the Jungle, the Mighty Jungle, The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Is it called The Lion Sleeps Tonight? Yes, I googled it. I probably should know that. But yes, Jim was encouraging him to sing The Lion Sleeps Tonight, which in itself is interesting enough because he's just being a good person, trying to make Andy feel better. We know that Jim is a very good person for the most part. I'm sure he has his flaws, but generally his heart's always in the right place. And apart from when he kissed Pam when she was about to marry somebody else. But that aside, it was a lovely moment. But what I really liked about this is when Andy joined in and he was able to kind of let loose a bit and forget his anxiety in that moment, Jim smiled a couple of times. Like he was genuinely enjoying the interaction with Andy. And he wasn't just doing it to cheer Andy up. He was actually enjoying it. And I don't know if that's just a one-off. Jim and Andy had a nice, pleasant bonding moment. Or if it's maybe going to change going forward and Jim and Andy are going to maybe get along a little bit better. Maybe Andy won't be as insufferable. Maybe they'll tone down his character a bit. I doubt it. And maybe Jim will actually realise there are other sides to Andy other than his annoying personality. So it could go either way. I won't make any predictions because every prediction I make with The Office is always wildly incorrect. We must be coming towards the end of season 3. I'm going to try and check to see how many episodes there are without getting any spoilers. It's always a risk, but from what I can see, according to IMDb, 23 episodes. So there are 3 episodes left of season 3, and honestly, as I keep saying, I really think something will happen with Pam and Jim by the end of the season. But my predictions have always been wrong up until this point, so who knows. Either way, I thought Product Recall was a really enjoyable episode. As I said, I don't have that many notes from start to finish. I didn't go through things scene by scene like I often do, but it's not a sign of my enjoyment. It's just, I guess I wasn't feeling like it, but plenty of personal highlights, basically everything I've mentioned. And in general, I think it's a pretty great episode of The Office.